So I hear people ask the question, like, how can you vote for Donald Trump? You must be a racist, you're a bad person. If you like Trump, I don't see how anybody could support him. And what I hope that I've achieved with these videos so far is to show how a person could come to the conclusion that Donald Trump was the lesser of two evils. And even if that person is wrong about that and you disagree with their opinion, you can recognize that it doesn't make them a bad person with ill intentions. I don't know if I've achieved that, but that at least is what I've been trying to do. So in case you're new to the channel or you haven't watched all the videos, I'm just going to real quick kind of summarize what I think is going on leading up into the election. Because I've said before, it's not about politics. I'm scared of this media control and the influence that it has on everybody's lives. And I don't really care who owns it. I don't like it no matter which side is a part of it. And the last 4 years have shown this pattern that the media is being used not just for ratings and to make money, but it's being used to push political agendas. And since the people who control these news entities and are pushing out this propaganda, they're clearly trying to use it to make the public hate Donald Trump. A lot of people say, oh, you're in a cult and you worship Donald Trump. It's not even about that. It's not even really about paying that much attention to the things that he says. Anyways, I didn't have a Twitter while he was president. I only heard about his tweets because everybody would make such a big deal about him. But I guess to put it another way, you could say the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So since this is the man that the media and all of these political organizations are going after, I guess that's the guy I gotta hitch my wagon to. And I first noticed this media corruption with their treatment of Hillary Clinton, who by any objective standard is a terrible person. And ever since I saw this hypocrisy and agenda pushing, it's been impossible to unsee it. And as I dug into the backgrounds and the political rises of the various people entwined in the storyline, that Donald Trump was working with Vladimir Putin to steal the election, which, by the way, now in 2022 is a proven fact that the intelligence community knew at the inception of the investigation into the Trump campaign that the Trump-Russia stuff was just crap made up by Hillary. And although that was incredibly obvious to anyone who was following the investigation from the start, you can go back and watch the Russiagate videos that are on this channel. As I said, once I started looking into the backgrounds of these people like James Comey and William Barr and the histories of the CIA and other government intelligence agencies, and noticed their pattern of consistently false information and these allegations always surrounding them of corruption, that's when I started to piece it together and came to the conclusion that people have really been living under this spell of propaganda and this illusion of democracy for decades, long before I realized it. And I have mixed feelings about Donald Trump, which I will elaborate on at a later time. But I will say I'm appreciative because without him, I don't know if I ever would have been red-pilled, so to speak, or to see this reality and propaganda for what it is in real time. So personally for me in 2020 when it came time to vote, I was pretty confident in my stance that I went over in the old videos about World War II and JFK, that this powerful cabal, or whatever you want to call them, of people who are motivated by greed and self-interest were really behind the scenes pulling the strings and convincing us that we had this two-party system and this democracy where we had a say in the outcome. When really the outcome did not matter to this cabal of people because both sides were bought and paid for by them. And Trump was just the first person with enough money and fame on his own that he was able to get elected without them. And now with modern technology, you can't do what you did to JFK and just assassinate somebody in the middle of the afternoon. So instead, to update with the times, they're doing a character assassination through use of the mainstream media. On the Thursday before the election, I was talking to a friend of mine, Sue, and she asked me, on a scale from 1 to 10, how confident are you that Trump is going to win the election? And I told her that I was a 6. And she thought that was a pretty low estimate because she saw what a lot of people were seeing, which were these huge parades and enthusiasm for Donald Trump. So, doing boat parades, where in contrast you had rallies that looked like that for Joe Biden. So, you have the maxed out boat parades, and you have about maybe 50 people sitting socially distanced at a Joe Biden rally. So Trump gets thousands of people to just drive around their cars in the highway to just show their support for him. And Joe Biden has campaign events for like people that work for him and people that they pay to sit there in the audience. So it's hard to doubt that kind of support. And I told my friend Sue that what I was concerned about was that they were going to cheat. And I said it could be fairly obvious that they're going to cheat. I think they could find a box of votes in Joe Biden's basement at 3 o'clock in the morning, and Jill Biden will come out carrying the boxes and says, everybody has to count these votes. and you're racist if you don't, and oh my gosh, they all just happen to be for Joe and he wins. And then the media just goes along with that because they're all against Trump. Even Fox News, if you pay close attention, I think Fox News is there to convince a conservative audience of whatever they want the official narrative to be. And most of the time it's beneficial to have the two sides fighting against each other, so it will be opposite the things that they are pushing on their various viewers. But if you pay attention, there are a few things that they are telling you the same ultimate outcome. They're just trying to convince a person whose brain's wired in a more conservative way to hop on board. So I wouldn't be surprised if even Fox News goes along with this story that Donald Trump lost the election, because that is what is ultimately more beneficial for people to believe than it is to have people fighting about this particular issue. They want people to be accepting of these very sketchy results that nobody really expected due to that discrepancy in level of enthusiasm and support. I was anticipating that they would be able to get away with something that obvious, because that's what they did in the midterms in Broward County, like we talked about in that old episode, where they just kept finding mail-in votes or extra votes in the janitor's closet in the back of people's rental cars, and they all happened to be for the Democrat, and they were just supposed to not question any of these late arriving votes that were changing the outcome. That was like a trial run, and they never got in trouble for it or really had any accountability for it, so why would I not anticipate that they would do that again? I also think their excuse would be no better than calling you a racist if you don't go along with it, because that's what they did last time and time again, that's what they smear anyone who questions them as a racist or a rapist, and you're a bad person for disagreeing with us about something. And then when you look at the hypocrisy of their narratives of the protests over the summer with their narratives for mail-in voting, so it's either that we're lying about how serious the virus is because we want you to mail in your votes, or we're downplaying the seriousness of the virus because we want you to come out and protest and raise money for the Democratic Party, and we're willing to put your lives in danger in a pandemic because it benefits us politically. It's one of those two things, but I don't understand how you can justify that you have to mail in your votes because COVID, but you can go outside and protest and that's not going to spread the virus. Those two things both can't be true, and I don't trust the people that try to tell you that they are. Another issue with this story that I think is completely ridiculous is this notion that Joe Biden won the most votes in human history. It's like 83 million votes, and that's more than Barack Obama won when he ran either time for office, and I'm supposed to expect that you ain't black, Joe Biden, corn pop guy, kids rubbing my hairy legs in the pool, who can't get more than 100 people to come out to a rally for him, that he won with the most votes in history. That is ludicrous to me, but here is a video of the Democrats telling you that that is what happened.
Joe Biden more than 5 weeks ago with 306 electoral votes and received the most popular votes for a presidential candidate in American history. The president and many of his supporters are, unfortunately, continuing their efforts to undermine the will of the people, disenfranchise voters, and sow the seeds of mistrust and discontent to further their partisan desire for power. By not speaking out earlier, even though they knew it was wrong, that there was no evidence to support these claims, and that this inflammatory rhetoric is harmful to our democracy, many elected officials gave the president and his supporters license to spread damaging lies about the election. There was no election interference, and the election wasn't rigged. In fact, independent election security officials and the Department of Homeland Security have called this election, quote, the most secure in American history, end of quote. But I'm concerned that today's hearing will do more harm than good by confusing a few anecdotes about human error with the insidious claims the president has aired. Amplifying these obviously false narratives about fraud or irregularities corrodes public trust. It threatens national security, and it weakens our democracy and our standing around the world.
And when you bring up this discrepancy, you will most likely be hit with the rebuttal that people weren't voting for Joe Biden, they were voting against Donald Trump. But my question with that is that if anyone could beat Donald Trump, which is what they're now saying, that they were votes against Trump, then why was Joe Biden the candidate? Because in the primaries, they told you the opposite. They said the reason that they had to vote for Joe Biden was because he was the only person that could beat Donald Trump. So even though he was not a diverse candidate, he was an old, white, rich guy that's been in politics for 60 years, everything that we're all supposed to hate, he still got the nomination, and they told you that it was because he was the only one who could beat him. And now all of a sudden, the narrative switches to anyone could have beat him. You have to pick one. Both of those things can't be true. And that is why I have come to the conclusion that it is the left who is lying about this, because their story is never consistent. And you would also think that if there was this anti-Trump mandate that was sweeping the country, that you would have seen that trend going on all night long. But as we watch here in this clip from CNN, they are going to show you, if you pay attention to the popular vote on the screen, Donald Trump was actually leading in the popular vote for about at least half the night.
Well, you're seeing a map right now that's going to make Democrats nervous, and so which is why we need to emphasize the point that when you see red Pennsylvania, red Michigan, and red Wisconsin, we are very, 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 very early in the count there.
I also noticed something that's interesting, that those states that CNN just listed off, where they're cautioning their viewers to, oh, it's early, don't worry about it. Those states that they named just all happen to be the states that will eventually go on to flip their vote counts in the middle of the night and switch over for a Joe Biden victory. And so now I want to talk about some things that happened in the aftermath of the election that also raise a red flag for me about the truthfulness of what we're being told when it comes to these results. And in particular with the media and their coverage of these events. And I want to start with election night. Joe Biden is actually the first out of the two of them to come out and speak to the crowd. We're going to watch this news coverage where they play clips of his speech, and he's going to talk about having confidence that they're going to flip the votes in these certain states and they're ultimately going to win. And I believe NBC has a very glowing way of describing what he's doing. He's instilling confidence in his supporters. He's not giving up the fight. He's making good strategic moves to come out and speak. It is all very complimentary how they are covering Joe Biden's actions here.
I'm here to tell you tonight, we believe we're on track to win this election. And we're still in the game in Georgia, although that's not one we expected. We're feeling real good about Wisconsin and Michigan. And by the way, it's going to take time to count the votes. We're going to win Pennsylvania. Look, we can know the results as early as tomorrow morning, but it may take a little longer. As I've said all along, it's not my place or Donald Trump's place to declare who's won this election. That's the decision of the American people. But I'm optimistic about this outcome. You heard me say it before. Every time I walk out of my grandpa's house up in Scranton, he'd yell, "Joey, keep the faith." And my grandma, when she was alive, yelled, "No, Joey, spread it. Keep the faith, guys. We're going to win this."
Joe Biden cheering up his supporters, a little pep talk, and what's now really become a game of expectations, I think. We're at this point where both candidates trying to set the expectations as to where we're going next. Let's go to Kristen Welker at Biden headquarters.
Well, Lester, to some extent, this may have been strategic. Here you have Joe Biden, the first person to speak tonight, and his message was one of optimism. And he went on to say he believes they're on track to win the election. He's wrapping up now again, Lester. I wanted to give him a chance to finish what he was saying. But what he also did was to prepare his supporters for the fact that there is going to be a path ahead, that some of these votes are still being counted. He said we might not know the results until tomorrow, and of course, it could be even after that.
So now let's compare that to the coverage that Donald Trump's election night speech gets from the same news organization.
I want to thank the American people for their tremendous support. Millions and millions of people voted for us tonight, and a very sad group of people is trying to disenfranchise that group of people. We were winning everything, and all of a sudden it was just called off. It's also clear that we have won Georgia. We're up by 2.5% or 117,000 votes with only 7% left. They're never going to catch us. They can't catch us. We also, if you look and you see Arizona, we have a lot of life in that. And somebody declared that it was a victory for, and maybe it will be. I mean, that's possible. But certainly there were a lot of votes out there that we could get because we're now just coming into what they call Trump territory. I don't know what you call it, but these were friendly Trump voters. And that could be overturned. The gentleman that called it, I watched tonight, he said, well, we think it's fairly unlikely that he could catch. Well, fairly unlikely. We're up 690,000 votes in Pennsylvania, 690,000. These aren't even close. It's not like, oh, it's close. With 64% of the vote in, it's going to be almost impossible to catch. And we're coming into good Pennsylvania areas where they happen to like your president. I mean, it's we're winning Michigan. I'll tell you, I looked at the numbers. I said, whoa. I said, wow, that's a lot. By almost 300,000 votes. And 65% of the vote is in. So when you take those three states in particular, and you take all of the others, I mean, we have so many. We had such a big night. You just take a look at all of these states that we've won tonight, and then you take a look at the kind of margins that we've won them by, and all of a sudden, it's not like we're up 12 votes and we have 60% left. We won states, and all of a sudden, I said, what happened to the election? It's off. And we have all these announcers saying, what happened? And then they said, oh, because you know what happened? They knew they couldn't win. So they said, let's go to court. And did I predict this, Newt? Did I say this? I've been saying this from the day I heard they were going to send out tens of millions of ballots.
We're listening to the president speaking at the White House, but we got to dip in here because there have been several statements that are just frankly not true. The president going through some of the states, stating that he has prevailed in those states, naming Georgia, saying they're winning Georgia, whether they won Georgia, there's no way they'll catch us, that they're winning Pennsylvania, won Michigan. The fact of the matter is those states have not come close to counting all of their vote. There's still outstanding vote. Do we have a moment to go to Chuck? We'll keep our ears on this and promise to go back as news events warrant. But just can you explain why it is that it's not possible for anyone to say they've won in this particular state?
Right.
So Trump's doing the same thing thing that Joe Biden's doing, just rallying up his supporters. He's doing it in his typical Trump fashion, but that is so hypocritical for NBC to cut him off in the middle of it when they let Joe Biden ramble on about how they're going to flip the states and all, or flip the votes in all of these different states, and that they're, going to win in Pennsylvania. So Joe Biden can declare victory when he's not even in the lead, but Trump acknowledges that he has kind of landslide victories in some of these, or leads in some of these states, and that's the part that gets fact-checked. Why can't they both just say what they're going to say, or why aren't they both being censored until the actual results come out? It's very hypocritical to cut only one of them off. But out of curiosity, I wanted to know what Trump was saying when NBC cut his feed. So now we're just going to listen to the rest of that speech from Fox News.
And did I predict this, Newt? Did I say this? I've been saying this from the day I heard they were going to send out tens of millions of ballots. I said exactly, because either they were going to win, or if they didn't win, they'll take us to court. This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. So our goal now is to ensure the integrity for the good of this nation. This is a very big moment. This is a major fraud in our nation. We want the law to be used in a proper manner. So we'll be going to the U.S. Supreme Court. We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list, okay? It's a very sad moment. To me, this is a very sad moment, and we will win this. And as far as I'm concerned, we already have won it.
So they censored out the part where Trump predicted exactly what was going to happen, where they would find a bunch of votes and add them to the count at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it would flip the state over to Biden. But I'm no fan of Fox News, and this is probably the biggest reason that I'm about to show you right here, is that after this election, Trump's press secretary, Kayleigh McEnany, she comes out to do a White House press briefing and is going to go over evidence and irregularities that they found through investigations into these various states where the voting stopped and then the total switched in the middle of the night. And as she starts to talk about this, Neil Cavuto on Fox News cuts her off and says that they can't air this press conference because they can't fact check what she is saying in real time, so it would be irresponsible for them to let her speak on television. And my questions with that are just, if the White House press secretary is speaking at all, whether it's a lie or not, it's still news. It's newsworthy, and then you as journalists, you go and you investigate that. You follow those leads, and then you can come to the conclusion after the fact if they were lying and misleading people or if they're telling the truth. At no point is it your duty to fact check these people in real time, and if it was, why weren't you doing it over the past 4 years when people like Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff and all of the liberals are allowed to go on television and say that Trump was working for Putin? They weren't able to fact check those in real time or ever, but they're allowed to talk about that whenever they want. So that tells me there's something very important that is going on here that even Fox News viewers aren't supposed to know about. And I think that is a scary level of censorship that they have given themselves the power to decide what the public is allowed to know.
We want every legal vote to be counted, and we want every illegal vote to be...
I just think we have to be very clear. She's charging, the other side is welcoming fraud and welcoming illegal voting. Unless she has more details to back that up, I can't in good countenance continue showing you this. I want to make sure that maybe they do have something to back that up, but that's an explosive charge to make, that the other side is effectively rigging and cheating.
So as I said, it was never a problem for the left to accuse Donald Trump of welcoming fraud with the help of Vladimir Putin. Nobody had to fact check that in real time. We could just print whatever we wanted. So I made this next video here where a couple of, I believe, senators are talking during congressional hearings about this hypocrisy with how we treated election interference and election fraud allegations in 2016 versus now how we're treating them in 2020. Because we could talk about whatever we wanted in 2016 and those questions were welcomed and they were about ensuring democracy. But now when we do it in 2020, you're eroding democracy and you're conspiracy theorists if you ask questions.
You cannot argue that the question regarding election integrity from the right is an attack on our democracy, our constitutional republic, especially after 4 years of the Democrats claiming that the 2016 presidential election was stolen because of Russian interference. Here's what a member of this committee said. Mr. Raskin from Maryland said, quote, "I would love to challenge the Electoral College vote because our election was badly tainted by everything from cyber sabotage by Vladimir Putin to deliberate voter suppression by Republicans in numerous swing states." That's what he said. And we went through literally 4.5 years, right up to the start of the November voting, the early balloting in Arizona of Hillary Clinton and her supporters in the media saying that the 2016 election was stolen by Republicans.
In December 2016, there was a poll that was done on if the American people believed that the Russians interfered and changed our election. At that time, 32% of the people believed that the Russians had influenced the outcome of the election in December of 2016. Based on that belief and what was going on, there was launched a whole series of hearings. Certainly the Russians were trying to interfere in our elections, but we spent millions and millions of dollars investigating it. We did 6 different public hearings on Russian interference just on that one topic to make sure that we were paying attention to it when it all started with 32% of Americans in December of 2016 believing the Russians had interfered in our election. A few days ago, another poll asked the question, do you believe there was election and voter fraud in a presidential election between Joe Biden and Donald Trump? This December, 46% of the voters in America have said yes, 45% saying no. Interestingly enough, Trump voters say there was fraud, 80%. Biden voters also said 16% that they believe that there was voter fraud. We watched what happened in 2016 and what the American people thought and saw, and so we engaged with hearings, we looked at the issues, and determined, do things need to change? Is there a potential for a problem? The answer was yes, there's a potential, and we ought to fix that. Now, amazingly, after this election, all kinds of issues have come up and said there are potentials for problem, and everyone seems to be saying, move on. The only reason I can think that that would be different was because the election outcome seemed to be different.
I certainly can't think of any other reason than that. So if somebody has thought of one, let me know. I'd love to hear it. But the hypocrisy is stunning to me. But one thing that is not different and seems to always remain the same is this Democrats, the left, the deep state, whatever you want to call them, their tactics. They just do the same things over and over again and keep getting away with them. If you remember back to Hillary's email scandal where her emails were subpoenaed and then she went ahead and deleted the ones she didn't want investigators to see and wasn't really held accountable for that. We're going to watch this clip where they talk about how the vote counts that got audited and the files in this county in Arizona where the election results have been disputed, that their election supervisors also tried to withhold information in a similar fashion.
Is it standard practice to delete files off a server after an election, Mr. Bennett?
I hope not.
Mr. Gates, will you agree with that?
I would say that it is appropriate to maintain files, and that's exactly what we did. We deleted, the deleted files had been discussed, they were archived.
So you admit that you guys did delete, Maricopa County did delete files off the server after the election?
That are archived.
When you released these servers and this information to the auditors to begin with, they didn't have access to those archived files at first. Is that fair to say?
They did not subpoena those, that's correct.
Okay, so you didn't feel obligated to turn that over then to them?
We responded to the subpoena.
Okay. Mr. Bennett, your response to that?
I find it, frankly, laughable to suggest that a county, in response to a subpoena, could say we will delete files from the hard drives and materials that we give to the auditors because we have those files archived on data that we did not give to the auditors when the subpoena said turn over all the records related to the election.
So I do not understand why these people can continuously delete and withhold information from investigators and continuously get away with it and then point the finger at the other side saying you're falsely accusing us. We haven't done anything wrong. If you haven't done anything wrong, why are you trying to withhold information? Seems like a pretty genuine question to me.